Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm glad you have an opportunity to tune in. I'm sorry it's been a little while since our last video. I actually had recorded a video, reviewed it, did a little editing to it, and I just didn't like it. I didn't like how it came out. So anyway, I wanted to start over. So I'm sorry it's taking so long to get to part 4. In our last video, we looked at what ancient Athens would have looked like for Paul as he arrived there. We talked a little bit about the idolatry that might have been involved. Also, we talked about Athena and the Nike goddess Nike, and we talked about the Parthenon, showed pictures of the Acropolis and stuff like that. So I want to get back to the scripture. So let's read once again chapter 17, verse 16 of the book of Acts. It says, "Now while Paul was waiting for them in Athens, his spirit was being provoked within him as he was observing the city full of idols." Verse 17, "So he was reasoning in the synagogue with the Jews and the God-fearing Gentiles, and in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be present. And also some of the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers were conversing with him. Some were saying, 'What would this idle babbler wish to say?' Others, 'He seems to be a proclaimer of strange deities,' because he was preaching Jesus and the resurrection. And they took him and brought him to the Areopagus, saying, 'May we know what this new teaching is in which you are proclaiming? For you are bringing some strange things to our ears, so we want to know what these things mean.' Now all the Athenians and strangers visiting there used to spend their time in nothing other than telling or hearing something new." So before we move on, I want to look at a couple of things. First, I want to establish who the preacher is, because there is a message getting ready to be preached in the following verses, and I think it's obvious that the preacher is Paul. So that's the first thing I wanted to establish there. Also, I want to look at the audience. Who is Paul addressing here in chapter 17? Now, the first group of people that we can see he would have been addressing were idolaters, and we can see that in verse 16, where it says the city was full of idols. And if you have a city full of idols, then you certainly have idolaters in the city. So there would be some of the people that he would have been preaching to. So then we also see in the synagogue there were some Jews, and so Paul would have been preaching to some Jews. Now, Paul always preached to the Jews first. His first place he would go in the city was to the synagogue, if there was one there. And part of that is because the message or the covenant of God, the promise of the Messiah, was made to the Jews, and they were the first to receive the notification necessary, I guess, of the coming Messiah. And so also they were very well versed in the Old Testament, and they would have known, they would have had some foundation to build upon, where those who were pagans may not have had any understanding at all. So it says that he was in the synagogue with the Jews and the God-fearing Gentiles, and in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be present. So you have the Jews, first you have the idolaters, you have the Jews, you have the God-fearing Gentiles, and then you have everyone who was in everyone was present in the marketplace. And he did this every day, and we don't know how many days he was there or how long he did this, but every day he did this. He spoke with those in the marketplace. And then it says that there were some philosophers, namely the Epicureans and the Stoics. Now I could do a video just on the Epicureans and Stoics for a long time, and we could really dig into what they believed. But it's interesting because this is the only school of philosophies that have been directly mentioned in the scripture. And these two had been around for probably 600 years or more at the time of Paul being in Athens. These schools of thought lasted a very long time. The Epicureans were what we would call hedonists nowadays, where they wanted to they wanted to feel pleasure, but not in a sense of it was a very controlled pleasure. It was very controlled. It was like, for instance, I was reading something that Epicurus wrote that was saying something along the lines of, we don't want to overindulge in things because the whole purpose was to please themselves. So if they overindulge at any point, there might be a time where they could not indulge as much, and then therefore they would not be pleasing themselves. They would be disappointed in not being able to achieve that same level of pleasure. So it was very controlled. They weren't out of control, crazy hedonists doing every single thing that they possibly could. And the Stoics were more about self-restraint, I guess you should say. And they weren't very emotional people. They were more reason-driven. They believed that anything that could be found to be true would be found through reason. And we'd see this later in history through the Enlightenment period, where reason was king, reason was the thing. You know, if we can't reason it, then we can't know it, and all this other stuff. So, but the main point I want you to understand is that these Epicureans and these Stoics were in opposition to each other. They did not agree on most of the things that they all both believed. And so we have two different people, two different groups who are separated in their beliefs and are basically opponents in a way. And then we have those who were mockers, really, who said they called Paul a babbler. And you know, this has the idea of a bird picking up seed. In other words, he pick up a doctrine here, pick up a philosophy there, and then mix it all together, smash it in together. And so what they were saying certainly was not a compliment towards Paul at all. They were basically said he had nothing original, nothing true, but just got a lot of stuff mixed up and tried to bring it together. And so therefore you can't trust a person like that. So therefore he's a babbler, he's just speaking or whatever. He's not really a philosopher. He's not an Epicurean, he's not a Stoic, he's not a student of Aristotle or Socrates or Parmenides or Heraclitus or anything like that. So in Christianity, we still have that charge brought up against us even now. They say, oh, the Christian religion, the Christian doctrine and theology and dogma is not original. Look at the early pagans here, and in fact, I had a guy tell me one time that Psalm 29 was an adaptation of a worship song or a praise piece to Baal, and so he said, well, therefore, you know, it's okay for us to borrow from this religion or that one because the Bible did it. I'm not getting that. But anyway, so basically they were saying that a lot of passages in Scripture are just amalgamations of ancient religious traditions. So anyway, another one group that you had the mockers, and then you had the Athenians, and they were willing to hear Paul. However, they weren't really seeking for truth, but they were just waiting for like the newest kind of thing to come along, you know, and the newest kind of philosophy. They wanted to have something new to talk about, and they weren't really, you know, interested in truth, but they wanted something to argue, something to debate about, and so really there's and I'll tell you, there's a lot of Christians like that now, or at least people who profess to be Christians. They really don't want to know truth. They're really not seeking truth, but they want to debate and bring up, you know, questions and question solid theology and doctrine for the sake of questioning it, so they can have something to argue and debate over. And really, we shouldn't spend much time dealing with these type of folks at all, really. At the root of it, it's pride. They want to feel good about what they're doing. They want to quote-unquote challenge someone's opinion or feelings or doctrine. And really, they're not really trying to move forward, learn anything new. You know, they're just trying to uproot some really sound traditions. So I just wanted to look at the audience, and then in our next video we'll look at the lesson, what the message actually was that Paul was dealing with as we go more through the scriptures. So we'll talk about Paul at the Areopagus or Areopagus, however you want to pronounce that. I guess it depends on where you're from. But so that'll be in our next video, and I look forward to seeing you soon. All right, grace and peace.